So we can start. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar co-hosted by Angola Cables, Ciena, Dataxis, and Dataxis. The session was initiated to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of Angola Cables Data Center Fortaleza, and it will address the business and technology trends that are shaping the internet industry today and in the next years. So the objective is to provide insights on the key trends to expect in the internet, in particular to ensure a more agile, secure, and resilient network infrastructure. So it might look a bit complex at first sight, but our panelists are very talented, trained orators, and the objective is not to go into too much details, but to understand the trends that will have an impact on tomorrow's internet delivery. My name is Saivan Ebi. I'm an analyst at Dataxis. We are a market research company focused on media markets, and we also usually organize conferences. I will moderate the panel after presenting a short introduction on the market's key characteristics. Our panelists are António Nunes, CEO of Angola Cables, Fabio Medina, VP Latin America at Ciena, and Ivo Ivanov, CEO at Dataxis. We'll let them give you more details about their activities right after the market presentation. The webinar panel will last around 45 minutes with an additional 10-15 minutes at the end for the questions and answers. So if you have questions during the session, please write them down. There is a box on the bottom of your screen. And if they are directed to someone in particular, you can also mention it and mention it directly in the question. So I will start with the introduction on the main trends that we've observed on data connectivity and consumption worldwide. So the first thing that we can highlight is the growth that was observed in connectivity in almost all regions. So we see that there are still discrepancies between regions. We have North America and Europe, which are extremely developed and where the connectivity is reaching almost every household, even if there are some remote areas where it's not reached. And then in the other regions, and in particular in Africa, Middle East, that we see here at 29%, the fixed internet penetration remains extremely low. So we are talking about DSL access, cable, fiber, mostly. And this is to link with the strength of the mobile market in this region. In Africa, in particular in Sub-Saharan Africa, connectivity is reached through mobile. So this is the mobile access that are increasing extremely rapidly. And the quality is also increasing as 4G networks are expanding and the penetration of smartphones is also increasing. In Latin America, there are still room for improvement in terms of connectivity, but it's growing and there are some very interesting fiber initiatives. So here we have the chart to show this growth in penetration and in subscribers. And we can also see the split by technology, by access of the last mile. And the most striking here is the rise of fiber to the home, which is gaining ground among internet subscribers. And this growth is fueled by the public policies that are implemented in some countries, aimed at increasing the fiber access of the population. And it's also due to the quality of the technology, its speed, reliability, and capacity. And on this topic, on the last mile access, there are also some new initiatives that might be discussed later on during the panel with our panelists. And we can mention, for instance, the low Earth orbit satellites that have been initiated by SpaceX or tech companies like Amazon or Facebook, who have projects in in this area. And with the rise of internet connectivity, we also saw the launch of innovative services, new types of offers that are distributing video content. And they rely heavily on the ability for carriers and infrastructures to deliver the videos that are being watched and to provide enough bandwidth for massive and concurring consumption. So we see on the chart that these models have spread rapidly all over the world. We decided to highlight here the SVOD market, so the subscription video on demand. This is platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, or the recently launched Disney+. So we see that the subscriber numbers reached around 800 million in 2020. And it's expected to continue in the coming years, as we see in the forecasts. And we also added the AVOD platforms, so the ad-funded video on demand. And here we have the number of platforms that are launching. So we see also that the number of offers, content providers, is increasing rapidly here in the US and in Europe. There is also another type of content delivery that we didn't mention in charts. It's the TVOD, transactional video on demand. And this is also interesting because it has gained in popularity, in particular during the COVID-19 crisis, as the TVOD constituted substitution offers for movies that could not be released or events that could not take place. And this usage, these video streams have strong implications on infrastructure as video constitutes today the majority of the internet traffic worldwide. And as we see an ever increasing number of content providers that are expected to consolidate the trend. So all these trends indicate that more bandwidth availability in the near future would be of utmost necessity to accommodate the content demand. But fortunately, the industry is already working hard to deliver ultra-fast speed internet and enable all kinds of usage. And this is what we'll discuss now with our panelists that I would like to welcome now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us. To start, I will let you give us a few words about yourself and the activities deployed by your company. And we can start with our co-host. So first, António, CEO of Angola Cables.
So my name is António Nunes. I'm the CEO of Angola Cables. Angola Cables is an operator that have its core business in the Atlantic region. So we have operations starting from Angola, but then we have operations in several countries in West Africa. We have also operations in Brazil because we have a cable crossing from Angola to Brazil. And we sell a lot of capacity in US. So we serve, one of our cables is also connecting to Europe. So we have a completely ring in the Atlantic. So we serve all this Atlantic area with the connectivity and IP transit. So we provide quite well and good IP transit to a lot of countries in Africa. And we also operate 2 data centers, one in Brazil, one in Angola.
Okay. Fabio, can you also say a few words to describe Ciena's activities and your responsibilities?
Absolutely, thank you, Simon. So I am Fabio Medina. I am a general manager and vice president of sales for Ciena for the Latin American region. I also have another responsibility for the multi-service operators in the Americas. So on that, I'm also in touch with the North American market in a way. For those of you who are not familiar with Ciena, we are a US-based networking systems, services, and software company. We are publicly traded in the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker Ciena, or the ticker Cien, sorry, C-I-E-N. And size-wise, we're about 6,500 people that operates in 35 countries, serving a little bit over 1,500 customers. That includes serving over 85% of the top service providers of the world. On the technology side, we hold over 2,000 patents on technology developments that we bring to market. And our mission is through the creation of technology of both hardware and software, as well as the services, to enable our customers to better adapt to the ever-changing environments in which they operate, and to help them deliver better and more connected experiences for their businesses and their customers. So said in a little bit of a different way, we develop highly advanced programmable hardware and software that, combined with intelligence and analytics and automation, help networks adapt to changing conditions. That's kind of what we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And finally, Ivo, CEO at Dataxis, can you elaborate on Dataxis' activities?
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody on the screens, and to my colleagues on the panel, and to you, Seba. Thank you for the nice introduction. My name is Ivo Ivanov, CEO of Dataxis International, responsible for strategic development, especially for new markets. So the topic of discussion today is very close of what I'm doing daily. Dataxis, as you can see here behind me on the screen, we celebrate this year 25 years of anniversary. So started 25 years back in time in Germany in 1995. Dataxis today, after 25 years, operates layer 2 internet exchanges on 24 markets worldwide, including North America, with New York, Dallas, with a huge presence in Europe, in Germany, in the south of Europe, Lisbon, Madrid, Marseille, Palermo, Istanbul, Middle East, and Dubai, India, with Mumbai, Calcutta, Delhi, and Chennai. And recently we joined also the Southeast Asian market. What we do is layer 2 interconnection, with main core product is still peering, but of course a variety of new services we have introduced over the years, like cloud exchange for better cloud connectivity, virtual one-to-many or private interconnection services, and the latest generation of services related to enterprise interconnection. The majority of the exchanges and the platforms in all these markets are interconnected, which makes Dataxis the largest data center and carrier neutral interconnection ecosystem today. It's my pleasure being part of this discussion. Okay,
very clear. So we can start the discussion with the current events topics. So we've all observed the fast transformation to our lives that the COVID-19 crisis brought. Companies using remote technologies, family gathering on online video applications, etc. So it seems that the crisis accelerated the digital transformation. How was it lived by the stakeholders of the internet connectivity? Did you observe a strong growth in traffic? Maybe since you had the hand, Ivo, you can start.
Oh yeah, with pleasure, and I can report a lot on this topic. I'm not sure the 45 minutes will be enough, but just let me summarize. Yeah, we have, as we all know, involved in this industry, the COVID-19 times are challenging, at the same time extremely also traffic relevant, as our homes became our offices, as children and students, they have to do their school work at home, so the schools are closed, universities are closed, companies stopped working from their offices. So all these led to the result that internet traffic in general grew a lot. On our Dataxis platforms, we have experienced similar trends on all markets, so I can report a global trend as follows. Up to 50% on average growth on all our platforms, and up to 300% growth on three main areas: video, gaming and collaborative work applications, the Zooms, the Teams, the WebExes, and the Skypes, just to mention a couple of examples. These are the trends we have experienced, a massive upgrade by a lot of customers we have globally. We have more than 2,000 connected networks, from the biggest ones up to small and medium-sized operators. They all took care to upgrade the infrastructure. And we have seen also a change in network management, where the challenge came out of the shift of traffic demand, as I mentioned, where homes became offices and schools and universities at the same time. A lot of operators, they face the congestion on the last mile, which we have heard from customers, but also the way of load balancing on the networks have to be managed, where the symmetric on the network changed. Before COVID, it was much more download. Now during COVID times, where people have to work from home and a lot of applications are up and running, as the one we use now, like the Zoom application, this requires also a high volume on upload. So this symmetric upload approach on networks led to the result that network operators had to change the way they manage their networks. All in all, I believe our industry has been challenged, but at the same time, at least from our point of view as Dataxis and all the customers and friends and partners we know around the globe, I can report our industry took this challenge, and we provided the service actually the society worldwide needed in a very solid way. So people could stay active in touch, disregarding that they got physically locked, they stayed close digitally together.
So the infrastructures were not necessarily prepared for this, but they managed to cope with the crisis. Antonio, do you agree? What did you see on your side?
Yeah, completely. I can also share some of the information. So globally, the traffic in the Angola Cables network was growing 300%. Okay. In Brazil, for example, only in Brazil, we grow 6 times. So it was 580 something% of growth in terms of traffic. In Africa, we saw a growth of 1.5 times the traffic. And I mean, is what Ivo just said. At the beginning was a panic, because you have to rearrange everything. You have to run, you have to adjust your network, because, I mean, no one is planning the network for 6 times bigger upload traffic. But we do manage to come to the point that we could deliver to our clients. And in fact, we don't have many complaints about that. So we was able to adjust the things in time. And we see really a very demand of traffic coming up. So, and the situation is that we believe that this traffic will decrease a bit, but not at the time that we have before the COVID will come to the same point. So people now are starting to use the digitalization in a more efficient way. From the experience from our own organization, we have now people working better as they have been working before when they are in the office. So today we are considering that some of our people will be back into the office when everything is normal, but some of them, they can work from home because they work better home. So, and in terms of even efficiency of costs, for example, is we are being able to manage that much properly. So one of the things that we have always talking about the efficiency of digitalization, the situation that we are living today are offering us that opportunity to live that life. So, I mean, the kids are studying from home. This is amazing, you know. So this conference, I mean, if we have to do this conference in the past, some of us have to travel quite long to be together, and now we are doing that life. So that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of the changes might stay a bit longer. And Fabio, what did you observe during the crisis?
So I fully agree. I fully agree with the two statements from you and Antonio. Right? There is a proverb in English that says that necessity is the mother of all invention. And I think there is no doubt in my mind that in this case, COVID created enough necessities that acted as a full accelerator of the digitalization in many different areas. If you think about it, people had no choice, right? In response to stay-at-home orders and school and commerce closing and travel bans and all kind of recommendations to keep people at least 6 feet apart to slow down the disease, individuals, companies, and governments needed to turn to digital tools to try to resemble life as close as normal as possible, right? So that itself accelerated all those tendencies. So working from home, distance learnings, all the things that Antonio and Ivo mentioned, virtual events, those were tendencies that were already happening, but happening at a much slower pace and a much reduced pace. And what this did was to accelerate them. You know, those were considered almost optional, right? Working from home was kind of an option rather than a necessity, and suddenly COVID hit, and those became a must, and companies and people actually accepted that and understood the reality and reacted very rapidly. And I think as a society, we did great adapting to this new situation that we had, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine what would have happened if we would have this challenge 10 years ago when all these tools were not available, when the digitalization era was not as far as it is today. It would be an absolute disaster, right? We couldn't have this meeting 10 years ago. So that helped a lot. And I think companies reacted very well. Commenting a little bit on the traffic situation, I think you're gonna find different levels of traffic growth depending on where you look at the network. If it's wireless, if you're a wireless provider in downtown Manhattan, your traffic went away, right? Mm-hmm. If you are a multi-service operator with a access network in the residential area, your traffic went through the roof. So in average, by looking at statistics and by talking to customers, we saw the traffic grew somewhere between 30 and 35%, the aggregate traffic on the network. And that's at the peak of the pandemic. Now, that has reversed a little bit, and Antonio touched on this. It's probably now 20-25%, so it has come down somehow. Mm-hmm. But companies, through rerouting, through using the capacity that they normally have on the network for future growth, through using capacity that is there in the network for protection purposes, through using traffic engineering, actually stand to the challenge and deliver the services. So I thought that was a really good way to adapt to the situation.
Mm-hmm. To accelerate the migration.
I can also share that, for example, WAX, our cable between Angola and Brazil, was using a lot for backup situations. And during the COVID, they was using fully in terms of the capacity that the people was purchasing from us. And that's probably one of the reasons why our traffic grows so quickly. And we have been able to manage that properly, because most of the traffic or most of the capacity that the clients had, they was not being used fully. Mm-hmm. And they use completely the capacity during the peak of the COVID process.
Mm-hmm. So it means that if some of the demand stays, the capacities will have to increase in the next years.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I think the industry is prepared for this. We at Dataxis, I can speak precisely about our own capacities. We do have more than 80 tera available capacity, connected capacity on the different platforms. around 60%, bit less than 60% are in different type of usage. So there is a lot of room also for peaks and for growth. So we can take additional load, of course, at any time. But let me give you one further example, use case in times of COVID. Antonio touched on the cable. I want to give you one specific example from the educational sector in specific regions. So let's take the platform we have in Dubai. The government took the decision on one specific Sunday, I think it was one Sunday in March, I cannot remember exactly the day, but they decided that from this Sunday, all schools will be shut down. So in other words, all kids and students, they have to get their lessons and their educational sessions online in their homes. So what was required that the applications will still working, and this additional load will be taken. And this is what I will now say as a great example of collaboration of different industry participants. What happened is that Microsoft operating Teams, and we know Teams is an application used by educational institutions a lot, asked us on the exchange in Dubai, on the UAX, to extremely increase the capacity within a couple of days. This happened within 2 days. We were able, by the request on Wednesday, to provide, in collaboration with the local carrier partners, but also with the data centers, this upgrade. So on specific Sunday, which is the first day of the week, everything went live, and hundred thousands of different students in the entire region could reach out into their teachers and co-students. So this is an example how industry stakeholders and participants can collaborate together and cover the necessities, as Fabio mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And you also think that the usage have durably changed, that some of the demand is now the new regular demand?
I believe that this is definitely the case. What we have seen is nothing new, just to be very clear here. COVID didn't initiate something completely new. Before COVID, we have had this type of applications already for video conferencing. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of applications for different type of remote collaboration of teams, etc. But what COVID did is accelerating to a very high degree the amount and the volume and the intensity of usage. And the acceleration, and last but not least, which is the more important thing, is the awareness globally of the importance of digital infrastructure in general. It starts with the sea cable, it goes down with the data center, with the solid optical infrastructure, with the applications on a higher level, with our infrastructure on the exchange, and so far and so on. So this entire universe of digital infrastructure became so crucial. Now everybody, even the kids, understood that without a solid fiber connection, without a proper data center, a solid sea cable, they will not be able to communicate. And especially enterprises now are watching extremely carefully how they can improve their also control on their own infrastructure and became faster digitalized. I think this changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that is something very important that Ivo mentioned that I fully agree with, and that is, this is not new. Sudden surges of traffic that disrupt networks is not new for operators. They have been dealing with that for a long time. Global events and introduction of technology has disrupted networks for some time now. If you think back to 2007, I believe, if my memory doesn't fail me, we saw what the launch of a single device, the iPhone 3, did to a network in AT&T, which at the time I believe was singular. It destroyed, I mean, it took the network almost down just because you put one device that is bandwidth hungry, and that actually generated a plan that ended up investing, I believe, something $15–16 billion to put a network that can support this device and evolve in the future. And that traffic stayed, to your point, as this traffic going to stay, that traffic never went away. Devices only got more bandwidth hungry and they keep going. 3 years later, we saw what streaming does to a network, and then Netflix comes with the services and the access networks also get clogged. And that's another traffic that goes through a peak, goes back somehow, and stabilize at very high levels. And so this is not new. Unexpected demands, whether they are generated by an iPhone, the launch of a Netflix, or a pandemic, like COVID, and stress the network, are not new. And what is more key now than ever is for providers to deploy networks that have more capability and more intelligence to adapt to new traffic conditions. And that's actually what we in Ciena call the adaptive network. We launched that maybe 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And that's exactly what it's meant to be. It's meant to say, you don't know what is going to change in your network. So let's put analytics, let's put intelligence, let's put software, let's make the network be able to analyze itself in case of failures, to analyze traffic patterns so you can reconfigure and reutilize the entire capacity of the network. We no longer plan networks with dBs of margin just for the future. We use those dBs of margin to put traffic, and then in the future, if we need to use them, we'll figure it out. So it's really data-driven analytics and intent-based policies what scale the networks and reconfigure and adapt networks today. So I think that's a really, really important point. And I think I caught Antonio, so I apologize for that, Antonio.
No, I just want to edit something. So for the telecom industry was nothing new, that situation specifically. But for the rest of the society, we are now understanding something new. And this is the part of the efficiency of the business that I was talking before. Means that some of the companies that doesn't have to be telecom companies, I mean, enterprises are now understanding that the digitalization for its own business is a quite efficient way to produce better, okay? And this is the new part about all of this. And that's the reason why we used to say that this situation was accelerated the digitalization of the society, okay? Because now people understand, not just because they have to stay home, this is one fact, but the other fact is that in some of the cases and some of the situations, we become more efficient, okay? So we spend less and the result is better. So why not using that for the future? So that's exactly the point.
And if we look at the applications in society, so the trends that are driving the global bandwidth consumption, the global data needs, which applications do you identify? Which consumption trends do you think will drive the connectivity of tomorrow and will justify this increase in capacity?
Video for me is one of the big demands, okay? And everything that is related with video will drive traffic up, okay? So this application that we are using, because they have video on demand, is driving traffic, okay? And Netflix is driving traffic. So all the things that have video included will drive a lot of traffic.
Yeah, and the quality is expected to increase as well. So,
yep.
Yeah. Otherwise,
better
imagine
resolution.
that we are talking and we are here, so it doesn't work.
And Ivo, what do you think?
Yeah, I fully agree. If it comes to volume with Antonio, definitely video is king. Video will stay king in different varieties, especially if we talk about high def resolution, which is currently standard for quality for a lot of people because of the devices. They're getting better and better, and even 8K screens are now available in the stores. So this requires higher resolution, which leads to tons of traffic. But I want to touch on a second, let's say, perspective here, which is not the volume, it's more the quality on not experience in terms of having a smooth stream, but a high sensitive data, which is data produced by IoT, data which is extremely sensitive to latency. Data which is related to use cases like telemedicine, telediagnostic, especially if it comes to logistics and mobile, precisely the autonomous driving and this kind of processes where we have instant live exchange of data, which is extremely latency sensitive, where really every single millisecond counts. We know that around 20-25 milliseconds are really good to do even instant online gaming. But if it comes to crucial traffic data about traffic on the street, where you really want to make sure that there is no accident and everything goes smooth, then really every single millisecond counts. Having said this, what we believe at Dataxis is that this will drive our industry more into the edge, more closer, deeper into where the users and the devices are in the future. So this is one further trend next to the volume. And this will require smart, automated, and elastic solutions closer to the usage. Usage can be by people, but usage can be also done by devices like the IoT. And I believe 5G as a standard will play an important role there. So that's my second perspective. Yes, we have to cover the volume, but at the same time, we have to work on solutions which are flexible and affordable enough to cover the sensitive infrastructure demands in regions which are not served well today. And you showed in your introduction that Latin, Africa, and Southeast Asia, they're not that well served in both perspectives. Infrastructure is a bigger aggregation infrastructure comparison to Europe and the United States, but also, and even more important in the future, this edge interconnection and edge infrastructure solutions. So I believe this should be our entire industry approach to create this minimum level of infrastructure serving everywhere, because this becomes and will be even more in the future a foundation for a better life.
I completely agree with you. What we can see today is because of the infrastructure was not completed. The global infrastructure is not completed. So the services, the softwares, or the service providers are developing solutions to avoid this problem of latency. Okay, for example, in Netflix, what they do is they have to store the data in CDNs in order to replicate and to avoid that latency issue. But the IoT, things will be changing, and the 5G will change that completely. Means that for us as operators, we are already expecting a new wave of different types of necessities, you know, demand, latency, and capabilities that are coming now with the new wave of the 5G networks.
And Fabio, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. So more video and higher resolution of the video is going to drive a tremendous amount of bandwidth. There's no doubt about that. But I think that's perhaps what is more important is what they mentioned in terms of latency sensitive applications. With IoT, machine to machine, augmented reality, virtual reality, and all these new things coming on board, and I believe the last number that I saw is we're expecting in terms of IoT somewhere around 40 billion elements connected by 2025. And if you think back and you look back at the statistics from 2015, we were expecting 20 billion. So in only five years, we actually double what we think is going to be connected to a network. And those are going to be, some of those are going to be critical mission critical elements, and are going to be extremely sensitive to latency, as Ivo pointed out. So to do that, I also agree with his vision, right? Data centers will become significantly more essential, right? So coming out of COVID, companies now have the realization that they need to decentralize. So I think an initial uptake on colocation and servers and things is going to happen just because companies are going to say, okay, I need to be ready for situations like this. But past that, I think we're going to see an even bigger tendency in terms of data centers. I think the latest announcement from all the big cloud guys is that they confirmed that about 176 hyperscale data centers are going to be put in place in the next 18 to 24 months. And just to make sure that we understand the difference, right? The difference between a data center and a hyperscale data center is between hundreds of servers and tens of thousands of servers, right? So it's massive. And beyond that, it's exactly what Ivo says. We need to be closer to the user. At the end of the day, to replicate content and to decrease latency, you're going to have to be closer to the user. There's going to be a lot more data centers that are going to be put in place closer to the users and reducing latency on the network, increasing capacity, and making what is going to be a much more distributed cloud. There's no question that that's the only way to support the services.
And do you expect a global trend or regions that will be spared?
Yeah, so the internet of the future will come at different times in different regions. And I think your first slide represents that extremely well. Technology reaches different places in different times based on economy. Mm-hmm. Developed countries have the ability to implement technology a lot faster than other places like our region in Latin America or in Africa. So a lot of decisions are going to have to be made. Governments are going to have to figure it out, have to incentivize the deployment of technology in less economically beneficial areas, if you would. Mm-hmm. And all the things that enable customers to get to the internet. So all the last mile solutions and everything else, we're going to have to rethink how to increase that, to bring some of the access to internet in regions like Latin America or Africa faster. Mm-hmm. But there is no doubt there will be a gap in timing and the implementation for sure.
And Antonio, you're operating in Africa. Do you think that the region will catch up and implement the most advanced technologies faster, or how do you think it will happen in the future?
I completely agree with Fabio. I think things in Africa still picking up. Okay, so is a lot of investments being done in Africa. Just during this period, for example, many people, 2 or 3 big guys already call us to say that they want to invest in Africa in data centers. Okay, but it will be slowly as Europe or US, no? And this is all about money. I mean, if you have the capabilities to invest, then you will grow up much faster. Mm-hmm. And we still have in Africa a lot of different infrastructures that have to be supporting the telecommunications industry, like power, for example. Okay, so the cost of telecommunications in Africa is still very high because of the price of energy. Okay, and then all of that comes together. But I think Africa will pick up its time, and we can see that the demand is increasing year by year. Mm-hmm. So
and with the demand,
the internet in Africa is the continent where internet is growing much faster. Is Africa. Okay. Yeah. Of course, because the level is also lower, but the increase of internet in Africa is growing quite fast.
And with the growth in demand, we can expect a decrease in prices.
That's normal. This is exactly this is the normal. If you have I mean, this is the law of the market. You have a lot of offers, then your price will decrease. And if your market grows, your price will decrease. I mean, for example, now there are new cables, new submarine cables announced to come to Africa, okay? And these new cables are bringing huge amount of capacity. Of course, when the cables are ready, the price of transmission will drop. This is normal everywhere. I mean, in Brazil, since we start operating in Brazil, the prices of the internet already fall around 5 to 7 times. Okay, so it's huge.
Yeah,
for us, it's very bad because we need to sell, but for the market, it's a very good information.
Okay, so you were mentioning in the discussion about IoT and the next applications, the launch of 5G and the last mile. So, what does how is it affecting your activities? These deployments, these improvements of the last mile, the launch of 5G, the launch of fiber, and its expansion in some regions. What impact does it have on the quality and the efficiency of the interconnection?
From our point of view?
From your point of view.
So look, for us, all of that initiatives are demand. Okay, and this is what we need. For example, in Angola have been announced a new operator, okay, and for us is welcome because we need more demand. So if someone are bringing new demand to the market, for us is very good because we have a quite big pipe that you have to fill with capacity. So everybody that needs to buy capacity is very happy for us. So all of these new technologies are demand, and demand is what's keeping us alive. So yes, all of this is welcome.
And Ivo, from your point of view?
Yeah, the technology around 5G will require, as we already touched on this, new type of network design, a new type of interconnection services. So Dataxis started working a couple of years back already on new generation of platforms. Literally mini setups, you can call it exchange in a box, in a shoebox even if needed, to be placed next to a cell tower or be placed at the crossroad, be placed at a railway crossroad, be placed where the hundreds of sensors and devices, the things which are communicating to each other are based in, right? So as close as possible in all neighborhoods. This is the one. And if it comes to Africa, and this is valid for everywhere, right? That's not an African topic. This is valid for everywhere. But especially regarding Africa and also some countries in Latin, but also Southeast Asia, where we see a huge potential for much faster growth in the future, we Dataxis believe, and what we will do is to offer the same type of setups. They might be smaller, others might be bigger, but they will offer the same type of service range. We will not differentiate between a setup in the United States or a setup in Africa or setup in South America. We'll deliver the same grade of quality and package of services because we believe that a cloud exchange is needed disregarding if someone is in New York or in Luanda. It's just a matter of volume at the first step, but the services are already needed. And this is what I call creating faster and better infrastructure everywhere without differentiating in classes. There is no African need for infrastructure. There is a general demand for good infrastructure.
Okay, that's quite clear. And if we look at the last mile, I was mentioning during the presentation at the beginning, the low Earth orbit satellites. What's your opinion on this?
My opinion is just the space is the limit. It's not the sky. The sky is not the limit anymore. The space is the limit. And why I'm so excited about this technology is that we're talking about around 20 to 25 milliseconds. We're talking about new transponders, which allow to really provide high bandwidth access and connectivity. And this is amazing. This will change dramatically the way how geographically regions which have been extremely disadvantaged because the difficulty to create the proper investment business case and to deploy fiber there, because of the nature, the landscape itself, it's probably difficult to cover the 17,000 islands or even more, 7,000, I believe, of the Philippines, for instance. How you can place fiber everywhere. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to build cell towers everywhere. So this technology will allow the coverage of regions where people are disadvantaged today. And having said this, this will drive digitalization in these regions. This will enable the further higher usage and will lead to the result that the infrastructure we are all talking about has literally to be developed everywhere, starting from the sea cable up to the satellite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think this is a very interesting theme. Okay, this is a very interesting theme because imagine that a network with that scale will have a very good efficiency of cost price, okay? And they will put in question many of the operators in the world, okay? Because if you are operating from a balloon or if you are operating from a low satellite, all your base infrastructure costs are covered. Otherwise, you don't put the things up on the air. So, for example, for Africa, it will be a quite extremely challenge for the African operators because these guys will be competing with no comparable cost structure that we have to support in terms of the local operation. So it will be a new age completely, okay, for the undeveloped countries. It will be, and countries like Ivo said, in the Philippines, for example. So the local operator could not beat a proposal from a guy from the low satellite orbits. It's impossible to beat them. So now we come here to a position that is not only the communications themselves, is then the sovereign process of the countries, because we are becoming really a village in terms of all this behavior of data information that are crossing. So it will be a very interesting moment to understand how these things will happen. And I think we'll be staying here, seeing what's going to happen at that time.
And Fabio, do you see other innovations that could disrupt the internet last mile?
So I think that is a really good technological option, but I have to say I'm still a very big fan of fiber. Mm-hmm. And I think in every way possible, service providers are going to continue to evolve their networks, trying to get fiber closer to the user when it is economically feasible. And Antonio touched on this. It's all about economics, right? What can you afford to put down? And when economics are not an obstacle, I think companies will continue to bring fiber a lot closer to the user. So for example, multi-service operators will continue to transform their HFC networks through either fiber deep architectures or fiber to the premise architectures in some kind of way. And replace everything that all the copper and HFC for fiber if possible. That's what I see now. Getting fiber is expensive, and that's why options like the ones you guys talked about a minute ago become a reality. In the future, in terms of density and latency, that will continue to pose a little bit of a challenge. Even at 25 milliseconds, there are many applications that may not be there. We don't know. So I think there is going to be space for all the different architectures of all the different things that we're talking about. I think for rural areas or areas that are more remote, even Wi-Fi or WiMAX or satellite or even lower generation of wireless, 4G, 3G, 2G, will continue to be the vehicle for quite some time. And 5G is going to bring one more alternative to the market, right? So 5G is finally reaching access capacity and speed that allow many of the applications that we see today to function. So once they overcome issues with power and once they overcome issues with propagation all the way, I think we're gonna see that as a viable, call it a wireless last mile solution. I think we're still a little bit of maybe a couple of years to go to that. But at the end of the day, last miles will become a mix of things that will be decided by economics. There's no other way.
Okay, we'll see. So if we come back a little bit on your companies and the strategies, since we are progressing in the discussion, there's one particular aspect in when operating in the internet space, the lifespan of new processes, of new technologies is continuously shortening. So how do you predict, plan, and invest consequently when things are changing this fast?
That for who? For me?
For you to start.
Okay. Okay,
yeah.
So planning and predicting on the new era is becoming more and more difficult. I think what is very clear is that we need to build architectures that are more flexible. We need to bring as much intelligence as we can into the networks. And we need to build flexibility into the features that we build. What is going to hit us next? And we talked about the next iPhone, the next Netflix, the next Hulu, the next COVID. We don't know. We don't know what the magnitude is either. So flexibility, intelligence, and automation is the only way to try to get ourselves ready to react to any of these trends that are going to affect us, and we don't know when and we don't know how. And that's the essence of what we've been doing with the adaptive network architecture. Is let's bring flexibility, let's put lots of software, let's take a lot of data from the network, and let's try to utilize it as tools so we can rapidly react and analyze what is going on so we can reconfigure. That's the way I see it.
And I agree with Fabio, okay, and I think one of the very important issues today is to understand what is the demand of your clients. Because yes, the technology is changing quickly, but the demands of your client doesn't change from one day to the other. And if you become useful to your own clients, and if they recognize value from what you offer to him, so you will be changing with him. Okay, so the companies have to be able to be adjustable to the new models, because as you mentioned, and I'm completely agree, a business case today with 5 years time doesn't make sense anymore. Okay, because after 1.5 years, everything was changing. I mean, imagine that in 2019, in November, that we was making our, budget for 2020. I mean, no one was predicted that we was locked down for all this time. So it's really funny. It's really funny. So we have to be able to adjust ourselves quickly. Okay, so we have to be always in touch with the markets, and we cannot predict that what we plan is what is going to happen. So we have to have now plan A, B, and C on the hand, and working with all of them simultaneously. And some of the investments that you also asking are things that we have to predict them as a strategical vision for some of the companies. For example, I've been questioned a lot of times why Angola Cables was investing in a cable crossing Angola to Brazil, if the demand between these countries are so big that will justify to build a cable for that, okay? Fact is that today, no one are now question or are putting that question anymore, because we all understand what is the usage of having the continents linked with the cable with that capabilities, okay? We have recently, at the beginning of the year, we have 2 cuts in 2 different cables that isolated completely West Africa. And if Angola doesn't got that cable crossing to Brazil, we have completely isolated. So, and this is what we have been talking from the beginning. We have to be preparing our organizations for something that we never see before. And this is what happens a lot of times with the telecoms.
Yeah, and Ivo, how do you cope with the apparent unpredictability of the internet?
It's hard to. I have 3 suggestions where at least we at Dataxis we will focus on, and these are software, software, and software. This is what we do because I'm not saying hardware is not important. Of course it is. It's highly important, but we need a hardware as foundation. The elastic services we all are talking about and the flexibility, by-click solutions to give customers control on flexibility, to stop thinking in opening hours and working hours, because network doesn't have working hours, to think about automatization and announce robotics even. Everything requires software. So we at Dataxis, we're extremely focused on this, and this will be our investment focus. It's highly flexible, hard to predict, but at the same time, we believe this is the right path, at least for the next years. And just give you one example, because of some software developments, we were able also to introduce a couple of years back already robots, which started doing our cabling in the data centers, patching between different customers on the platform. And this became instant advantage during the lockdowns of COVID-19, where engineers were not allowed to get into data centers. So the robots we already had in place, they couldn't be arrested. They didn't have any issues with COVID-19, fortunately. So they continued working and connecting different networks. So I cannot get tired to repeat this. Software and automatization will drive at least our interconnection business a lot. And this is what we will invest heavily on and started already investing.
Okay, and before taking the question, since we are running at the end of the presentation, the panel, I wanted to touch on the importance of collaboration. The collaboration, the panelists that we have here are reflect the collaboration that is implemented within the industry. So is collaboration a decisive success factor in the industry? Maybe we can start with António.
I mean, we have been talking a bit before that, about that. I mean, the telecom industry have a very interesting movement that people in sometimes are competing with itself, and in the other times we are cooperating with ourselves. Because since we have to develop very expensive actives, like the submarine cable, for example, it does make sense for us to install a submarine cable with that dimension, because making that smaller, it will be the same cost, more or less, okay? So you have to make something bigger. And now that we have that, all that capacity, you don't share with the other guys, you know? So it makes much more sense to allow other people to use your own infrastructure, because then you will gain also from them somewhere else that you are not investing, that you are also cooperating, else having to support everything yourself. So I think the world are becoming a bit cooperative, because when we develop now anything, we don't think about our local market, we think about global, okay? And you are not able to scale that things global in a very short period of time. And most of the companies even doesn't have the opportunity and the money and the capability to do so. So you have to partner with other parties in order to be able to grow up. For example, our partnership with Dataxis is a very good example of that, okay? Because together with Dataxis, we was able to establish our IX in Angola, okay? And our IX in Angola grow up very quickly, okay? Because we have the cooperation from Dataxis. So means that some of the times we are competing because we are also delivering traffics, and in some cases we are competing with Dataxis, but most of the times we're trying to arrange way to cooperate, okay? So the same with Ciena. We also are buyers from Ciena. So of course Ciena have interesting to sell to us, but in some of the things we are trying to develop together opportunities to, for example, to investigate and to have better fixtures that could support our own business ourselves. So if we allowed Ciena to do that in our own network, we win because then we have that fixture, but also they win because they can sell to somebody else. So it's normally you know, a joint place to work.
Yeah. Fabio or Ivo, do you want to add something?
I'll just say, go ahead, Ivo, sorry.
No, please.
Thank you. I say, yeah, cooperation will be absolutely fundamental, especially to decrease the cost of the infrastructure. You know, we're seeing a lot of efforts now in open standards, open interfaces, even in the example that Antonio provided with submarine cables. If you go back 7-8 years ago, submarine cables had completely closed architectures, and the cost of submarine cables was astronomical. Architectures open up, and now you have a much more accessible technologies that you can put in submarine cables. And now what you have, I think the last count that I saw, there are about 50 cables that are being either built, planned to be added to the submarine subsea, right? So when companies cooperate, and there will be a line of competition that we have to understand all the time what it is. But when we cooperate and we align to standards, when we share technology and advancements that could be utilized, that translates into decreasing cost of technology in many cases. And that will be absolutely fundamental to continue to close the digital bridge which exists, right? So, yeah.
Ivo, you wanted to say something as well?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. A lot of things have been mentioned, especially the examples of Antonio of the collaboration between Angola Cables and Dataxis are live examples how a win-win can be created in many different areas, not the X in Angola, only the Angonix in Luanda, but also having the Angola Cables as reseller on many different Dataxis platforms allowed and allows Angola Cables to connect many different networks to our platforms who cannot get a physical direct access to because of their nature. So this enlarges the ecosystem for the benefit of everybody. And I would say today Dataxis is available as a service in hundreds of different data centers. We couldn't have done this without partners like Angola Cables, without partners like data center companies around the globe. So partnership is the nature actually of telecommunication and internet. If you look at the internet as a network of networks, it stays for partnership because it's interconnection and getting together on people and businesses and network level. Otherwise, it doesn't work by nature. And I think we'll see this more and more in the future because there is no single organization on the planet which can do the trick in the future. So partnership will be the backbone of growth of telecommunication services.
Okay, very interesting. We'll finish on this note, this optimistic note. and take questions if there are some. So remember, you can type your questions directly. There is a box on the bottom of your screen. You can type the questions and say to whom they are addressed.
So there are a couple already.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple, yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with the first one. So there's a question from Gerson Paolo. When will the cost of internet will go at a lower prices and more band? Other geographies have offers of 500 megabits and more at home services. So I don't know exactly at whom it's addressed.
The price of the internet is what we have already mentioned before. It really depends, first of all, from the quantity of operators that are offering you that capability, okay? So it means that if you have more operators offering service and this service is at the acceptable level, the next fight will be the price, okay? So we can see it, for example, in Brazil, as I mentioned before, that the cost of the internet in Brazil was dropping dramatically since we start operating in Brazil. And one of the reasons was even ourselves, because we come also to the market, we bring 2 new cables to Brazil in terms of connectivity. So the price of, I mean, it was a big offer on the market, so the price will start dropping, okay? In terms of Angola, for example, and specific for Angola, as I also mentioned, Angola have different factors that will influence the price of the internet itself. So most of the goods that we have to purchase to deliver internet into Angola have to be imported from outside, okay? Because we don't produce nothing local. So it means that, and our rate with US dollar today now is dropping dramatically. So the costs of the internet in the Angolan market is even increasing just because of this, okay? And all the other related costs. Of course, it's also understandable if you don't put the price of the internet in a level that people could be buying it, so your demand will be also smaller. So is a kind of thing that, again, it depends a lot from the ecosystem. If the ecosystem will be supporting the decrease of that cost, then everyone wins. If only one of the ecosystem is trying to drop the price, the price will never drop. So again, it's a very good example about how good we cooperate, because one of the reasons to do this is that we are able to decrease the cost of the infrastructure, and then the price of the client will be lower.
I think the main challenge on the cost of access to internet is the increased need to additional bandwidth. Once you overcome the issues that Antonio highlighted, when you have to pay double, triple taxes to import technology in a place, and you are collecting in local currency and paying in dollars, and you have to compensate for FX differences and things like that. Once you overcome all that and establish what the price of access to internet is, it seems that it goes in this forever cycle of price cannot come down because the need for capacity increases. So you are doubling your capacity for the same price every 12 to 18 months. And we've been on that cycle for, I don't know, 10 years now, right? And it's different prices in different markets, right? In the US, I think the medium market price is somewhere around $50 to $60. But in India, broadband connection, I think is $5 to $7, right? So the price will depend on the technology and the access. But once you get to a price, I think the game will continue to be, that is the price of access, and you will have to get as much capacity as you can with that access, because the applications that are hitting the market eat it up.
Okay, we have another question from Jose Vaz. Dear Antonio Nunes, in your opinion, what are the main reasons that Africa just increased 1.5 times the traffic during peak COVID-19, March, June, in comparison with other regions like Brazil, for instance, that grew 6 times normal?
So the reason is I mean, in Brazil, the market is much more mature. So people are using internet much more in Brazil as they're using in Africa. So Brazil are being, a lot of ISPs in Brazil have been building fiber to home in many remote places in Brazil. It's amazing. Okay, the number of kilometers of fiber to home that is installed in Brazil is really remarkable. And that's not the situation in Africa. So Africa, the major cities have internet access. The rest of the countries are using broadband, are using mobile access, okay? So when you go to mobile data access, the price is too high again, so the demand is lower. And that's the reason why we are using much less internet in Africa as we are using in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. There's another question, I think also for Antonio, from Ana Paula Felicimo. With rising demand in Africa, should prices fall even if energy costs remain high, or will energy costs fall as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think we already answered that. So if the demand increases, of course, the prices will decrease, you know? So one of the issues that, for example, during the COVID-19, for the Angolan markets, Angola Cables was delivering the double of the capacity for the same price for the local operators in order to support this increasing of the internet. But we also only increase that amount of capacity. So we're supposed to increase much more, and we was expecting, I mean, to give this opportunity to the market to increase the demand of the internet, but we don't saw that. So means that lowering prices is not the only issue. We need much more. We need more infrastructure. We need more accessibility. And as I said, for example, in Angola, the biggest access of data is through the mobile devices. So we have not a very big number of smartphones on the network. So we need more smartphones, means that the price of the smartphone have to decrease in order for the data increasing in terms of the network itself.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions. If you were saving your questions, or if you have some that pop up after the webinar, don't hesitate to contact us. We'll forward them. So then I can thank you all for this very interesting discussion. I remind also the attendees that the webinar will be published on our website. It will be sent to all attendees. If you want to catch up or download the recording, it will be possible. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.